Do you ever feel like the tech world is spinning you right back to where you started? Today, we're not just revisiting history, we're understanding the future. Welcome to the deep dive into Cloud-Prem, where the past meets the future in a high-tech embrace. Is the tech world going in circles, or are we spiraling upwards? Let's begin with the story. Let's talk about how enterprises have managed their infrastructure over the years. Let's start at the beginning. On-prem solutions. Once the unchanged king of the tech world, where you had all the control and all the security. Companies owned their data centers, managed their hardware, and controlled everything. But this came with a price: high cost, limited scalability, and maintenance nightmares. For today, we're going to use an analogy to help bring this to life. So let's liken on-prem to cooking in your own kitchen. If you're making a meal, you control the kitchen, you control the food, you control the ingredients, you control everything. So on-prem, think of it as cooking at home. With time, the cloud burst onto the scenes around 2005, revolutionizing how we thought about data and services, promising cost effectiveness, flexibility, and seamless connectivity. The shift was dramatic, offering the ability to deploy services, scale on demand, and integrate diverse systems effortlessly. Think of this as a restaurant. No longer did you have to own all the cooking ingredients. No longer did you have to have the kitchen set up yourself and maintain and manage it. Instead, you would go out somewhere and they would cook it for you. They would manage all of the restaurant and allow you to be able to get what you need. But soon the downsides of too much openness began to show. The interconnected nature of the cloud, while beneficial, also introduced significant vulnerabilities. Security concerns soared as data sprawled across multiple services and geographies, introducing duplications, increased storage, reducing visibility and control. The dream scenario began to fray, echoing Voltaire's words, "With great power comes great responsibility." Companies started questioning, was there a middle path? Is there another option? Enter Cloud-Prem. Cloud-Prem takes the benefits of both. Cloud-Prem emerged as the middle path around 2015, a promising hybrid model that blends the flexibility of the cloud with the control of on-prem solutions. Cloud-Prem is collaborative cooking, where you can use someone else's kitchen, you can bring in your own chef, your own food, and work together to get the best meal that works for you, enabling you to have the security and awareness of the food you're eating. So Cloud-Prem really is the combination of cloud and on-prem to address this, bringing the security of on-prem and ownership with the flexibility of cloud. Let's talk about the evolution of computing. At first, we had on-prem, which was localized control. It was on-site servers and infrastructure. Enterprises had to manage and maintain everything. Think of this as home cooking. When you make your meals in your own kitchen, you have to get the ingredients, you control it all. Then in 2005 came the scalability and flexibility of computing with the cloud, where you no longer managed all of that. Instead, you let someone else do it. Think of that as going out to a restaurant. You don't own the kitchen, you don't control the food, but you're able to order and get what you need. Now we're moving into the world of Cloud-Prem. This gives the flexibility of cloud whilst enabling the ownership and security of on-prem. Think of this as collaborative cooking, where you get to go to someone's restaurant, you get to bring your chef, your ingredients, and then you can cook the things you need. You can also just order off the menu as well. It allows for both of those worlds to exist. With this new world, though, we redefine what is a provider and a consumer. Who is providing the services? Who's consuming it? What does that look like? And what are those roles? In this new paradigm, we really have three new principles. We have our SaaS application host. That's the company that hosts and manages the cloud infrastructure, where your software is deployed. Think of them as the kitchen provider. So they would be someone like Snowflake, AWS, GCP. All of those people are the kitchen provider. We then have our application deployer. This is the organizational team that develops and deploys their software applications that are deployed into those application hosts. Think of them as the chef. You bring your chef, that full package service, into your kitchen environment that you own for your company. And finally, there's that business or enterprise. They are the people that consume that service. They are the ones who consume the food. So if you were going with our analogy, you have our kitchen provider who gives us the kitchen. We have our chef, which is our SaaS application that's deployed into the kitchen. And then we consume those services, be it directly from the kitchen or be it from the chef. This new world and new paradigm brings in a whole lot of new challenges for each of the different entities. So in this new paradigm, there are new challenges that need to be tackled. Let's talk about it from the SaaS application host first. They now need to provide visibility to allow the deployer to see and understand what's happening with their code. Security to make sure that the environment is still safe and managed. They need to optimize because there is now code that is running in their environment which they don't control. And finally, they need to introduce new features new features and processes to help manage this deployment cycle. Now let's revisit this from the perspective of our analogy. The challenges are much clearer when we think about it in that terms. So for the kitchen provider, they are the one providing the service. They need to enable visibility. So when a chef comes in or if someone's consuming or eating from their restaurant, they need to know what's being used, how it's being consumed, any issues. From a security perspective, they need to make sure they're not being poisoned, that the chef that's being brought in isn't influencing or destroying the kitchen or destroying the food that someone else will eat. You need to focus on the optimization. What's the best way to organize the kitchen? What's the best way to have the knives and the food set up so that people can access it in the way that makes sense to that new chef or as those services are needed? And then finally, you need to have those new processes. How do you clear out the new kitchen? How do you clear out the kitchen when a new chef comes in? How do you make sure that the different chefs aren't interacting with each other? How do you make sure that the food is aligned? How do you make sure that the recipes make sense for this kitchen and this setup? There is a lot to consider that makes that really hard from that perspective. The challenges for the SaaS application deployer are now very different as well. They had previously been working outside of their environment, working in different areas. And so now they need to re-architect so that it is designed instead of for multi-tenancy, for single tenancy. They need to have observability included and considered because they won't get the same view and image inside of their environment. They won't be able to see exactly what's going on and how their users are consuming their application. And finally, then there's standards and compliance. How do they still maintain their SOC compliance or HIPAA or whatever it may be when they're being deployed into someone else's environment? Now let's consider it from the chef's perspective or the SaaS deployer. What are the things they need to consider? Well, the chef, when they're in their own kitchen, they make meals for lots of different people. So they can design and do a lot of pre-prep. They can have their system and their kitchen set up that makes sense for them. But when they're moving into someone else's kitchen, they no longer control that. They're only cooking for one person. They don't need as many services or complexity. What about observability? In their kitchen, they're able to see everything and know what's going on. But now in this new kitchen, they don't know what's happening. They can't see everyone around them. They're not sure what the kitchen's going to look like, even when they're working in it or how that's going to work. Then there's also issues with compliance. There are a lot of food and health safety measures that they need to meet. And if that kitchen isn't meeting those needs, how do they know that they're going to? How do they know that they're not going to poison their customers by mistake? There's a lot of consideration that needs to go into that. Finally, we have the actual enterprise or the business that is consuming this service. They have new challenges as well. There's now issues with vendor management. There are so many different vendors available to them that can be deployed into their environment. How will they work? How will they trust them and know them? There's integration issues. Within this new environment, how are they going to make sure that everything works together and collaborates and all the code works and that can be set up? That's partly on them now. And the last part then is the cost. They're now not just being charged for the consumption of the cloud, but being charged as well for that SaaS environment as well, that software that's running in their environment. That increases the complexity and makes it much harder. But there is still that benefit that they get of around the security and the control, so there is a bit of a trade-off between the two that needs to be considered. Then last, from the person who's consuming it, when you're consuming the food, you need to decide who is the chef you're going to have. Are you going to have it from the normal kitchen? Are you going to bring in a different chef? They can all bring in different value and different things that work together. What happens if then you want to do the integration? So you bring in your chef, but you're getting ingredients from different locations. They're stored all over this new kitchen. There's a lot to make it all work together. And finally, there's costs now. There's all these different people coming into the kitchen, but you get that personalized benefit and you can choose who you're trusting and who you're working with. So there's a lot of value as well with this process. Technology goes in circles. Let's look back at the evolution of computing. Originally, there was the on-prem, which is where an enterprise owned everything. They controlled the infrastructure, they controlled the security, they controlled it all. But this came with large costs and an inability to scale. Next came the cloud, which allowed scalability and flexibility, but concerns with security. And now we're moving to this world of Cloud-Prem. That brings us the benefits of both, but also increased complexity for those being in that environment. From an analogy perspective, we can think of on-prem as home cooking, the cloud as restaurant cooking, where I don't need to own or control the kitchen, and I just go and get the food. And finally, this new paradigm of Cloud-Prem, which is this collaborative cooking, where I don't own the kitchen, but I can bring in my chef and my food and control it in my way. This increases the complexity for those who control the cloud. Think of them as the kitchen owner. The chef, think of that as the software provider, and us as the consumers, the enterprise, the business. There's considerations around how does the chef work in this new kitchen? How is the kitchen maintained? Does this cost me more as a consumer to be bringing my own chef and my own ingredients to the restaurant? There's a lot to think about, a lot of benefits, a lot of downsides, but there's a lot to it, and this new world is coming fast, so we need to adjust.